We've spent a lot of time recently looking at the world of verbs, and there's more to do there. But right now we're going to switch back to the world of nouns and words that relate to nouns, in particular adjectives. Adjectives are quite important words that modify nouns, like the green apple. Apple would be the noun, and the word green is the adjective that tells you something about the noun. It modifies the noun. The main thing to know about Greek adjectives is that they must agree with the noun that they modify. That is, they agree grammatically. So if the noun is masculine and nominative and singular, then the adjective that modifies that noun must also be masculine, singular, and nominative. That is, they share the same case, they share the same gender, and they share the same number. So that's fairly straightforward. On occasion, you will find an adjective that has no noun to modify. And in those situations, the adjective is actually functioning like a noun, or it is implying a noun that is actually not written. We call that the substantival use of an adjective that behaves like a noun. So that might be the good, when in the context you understand it means the good man. Man might not actually be there in the text. Good alone stands in for the phrase the good man. But when we do have a noun, we're looking for this grammatical agreement. Now what that means is every adjective in Greek will be able to match the case, number, and gender of the noun it agrees with, which means we need a whole table of different endings for each adjective, and this is where it gets a little bit complex, but it's not as complex as it may appear at first. Let's look at this table. First, adjectives. These are adjectives that end in a stem with a consonant. So our model adjective is agathos, which means good. Now the lexical entry of agathos will have these other endings included. The reason is we need a masculine ending, a feminine ending, and a neuter ending, as we see here in the table. All of these words here simply mean good. The reason we have these different forms is so that they can match whatever noun they're modifying. So let's go through them. First, the masculine forms of agathos. Agathos, agathu, agatho, agathon. Agathoi or agathi, agathon, agathois or agathis, and agathus. Now you will recognize these endings from your standard noun endings. In fact, if we take our word logos, these endings are exactly the same. Logos, logu, logo, logon, logi, logon, logis, logus. So the good news is you already know these endings. The same is true for the feminine. The feminine endings follow the endings of graphi. So we have agathi, agathis, agathi, agathin, agathe, agathon, agathes, and agathas. That's with the modern Greek pronunciation. Using the Erasmian pronunciation, we have agather, agathes, agather, agathen, agathai, agathon, agathais, agathas. Now, as I mentioned, these are the same as the endings for graphi or graphe. Graphi, graphis, graphi, graphin, and so forth. So you already know these endings. The same is true for the neuter column. These endings are the same as the endings for ergon, which you have already learned. So the forms are agathon, agathu, agatho, agathon, agatha, agathon, agathois or agathis, agatha. These endings are exactly the same as ergon, ergon, ergu, ergo, ergon, and so forth. So even though there are a number of forms here, all of which simply mean good, the good news is you already know the endings. And so this is relatively easy to learn. Now there's another table we need to look at as well, which is when an adjective stem ends in a vowel or the letter ro, such as hagios, which means holy. The lexical entry is hagios a on. This tells us that the masculine form is hagios, the feminine form is hagia, and the neuter form is hagion. Let's look at these forms. The masculine column first. Hagios, hagiu, hagio, hagion, hagii, hagion, hagiis, hagius. That's using a modern pronunciation. Using Erasmian, hagios, hagiu, hagio, hagion, hagioi, hagion, hagiois, hagius. Now again, these endings will be familiar. In fact, these endings are no different from the ones we just saw for agathos. Where we see the difference is in the feminine column. And instead of having an ita or eta ending like graphi or graphe, we have an alpha ending like ora. So we have hagia, hagias, hagia, hagian, hagie, hagion, hagies, hagias. These endings are again familiar from the form hora. And then finally, the neuter column is as we have seen already. Hagion, the endings are the same as ergon, and we know those too. So when it comes to adjectives, there is not a lot of new learning, even though there are these new tables. You can generate these tables quite simply if you already know your noun paradigms. The important thing to remember is that adjectives must agree with their noun according to case, number, and gender.